Crossing. Bill 91, one pack, green, over. That's 16, roger, over.
16, 1592, one Victor, two packs, Recon 1, over.
Boom. We are live, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome in.
Let's see. One of the last lives or the last live of the year. So, what do we have? How are we going to start this one off, Josh?
Well, today we're talking about a couple things, Henry, right? We are going to be running through some commentary on what our PA course does and doesn't show, expectation management based on past performance versus the reality of what rifles can actually do. We're going to go through an AAR of a course that you and I took earlier this week, which was excellent. Always valuable to get out and be challenged on new ideas. And ultimately talk about one of the major takeaways from that course, which was an effective way we were shown at this class, which can better identify what a reasonable max effective range of a rifle we're testing should look like. But before we get into any of that, you alluded to this being the last live of the year. Let's start off with some rapid fire Q&A. What do you say? A little AMA action? Go ahead, guys, hit the chat. Give us slam us with some questions here, and we'll sort of kick things off. Anything about what we've done in the year, what your favorite episode was, perhaps what you're excited to hopefully see in 2025. If there was something that you didn't see that you wish we would have hit on throughout the year, let us know in the chat as people trickle in and we get this thing on the road.
All right. So there have been some rather interesting comments so far. And first of all, welcome our mutual friend, Calvin at Firepower United, who, of course, is talking about how his PSA shoots sub MOA all day long. But I don't think Calvin actually has a PSA. So are you to tell me that Calvin is actually trolling us this whole entire time? Or did I go out of my list and purchase the top 5 AR-15 alternatives with bad advice? I think this is also another one. 30-06 is a cartridge that I personally really like to shoot. Josh alluded to a course that we took earlier that was with Adrian from Sidewinder Concepts. On the personal time that Adrian and I have, we text nerd stuff back and forth quite a bit. 30-06 at one point of our military's time was the sniper cartridge. Obviously, that was a standard cartridge, but there was a 175 match load in 30-06 that snipers were using before it transitioned to the M118LR as we adopted 308. But 30-06 actually is kind of one of those cartridges that's somewhat slept on, I think.
Definitely. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of capability you could pack into it without stepping into the Magnum territory. A lot of people consider that kind of like a Magnum minus, like a pre-Magnum. So if you're shooting at distances that Josh and I negotiate a lot, like 1,000, that's a sweet spot for 30-06 if you optimize it.
Scar 20, Henry. When's it coming out?
It's in the works. It's in the works. It has been filmed. It is on post-production. We haven't gotten to the debrief yet. I suspect Josh has been egging me on getting the debriefs done, and I've been slow on the post-production. But yes, Scar 20, what a lovely rifle. Recoil, however, I was surprised with it.
A little bit spicier than even what the 17 felt like, right?
Yeah.
Guns of the Future. We will get to that. We've got a little section slapped away here at the end of this session where we'll cover off what some of 2025 is going to look like for us. And if you hang around till the end or pop back in later, you'll see that for sure.
So Guns of the Future, though, I think a lot of people, guns are kind of interesting. Small arms are interesting I'll drop back to the Army talk, warfare, and historical implementation of small arms. A lot of people will focus on the big things. Obviously, right now, drone warfare is a big thing. People are still talking about a lot of the armor, like a lot of heavy stuff, artillery, obviously, precision rocket artillery as well. But small arms, they don't matter until they matter. I'll just put it that way.
Nice. All right, Henry. What do you say? Start rolling in here or what?
Let's get one more look. Is there anything else that you see?
I mean, just more of Kelvin doing Calvin things.
Okay. All right. So Calvin says he actually owns a PSA lower, so he's bested us. All right. So, and Josh, you'll talk about this a little bit later. We'll talk about what loot crates are.
Oh yeah. Loot crates are back. If you guys, we dropped those. Newsletter gang knows about it. They got the heads up. But loot crates are back at SlateBlackIndustries.com, and we'll be fulfilling those rapidly. Hopefully, get them out in time for Christmas. We're doing. I think there's a lot of ODG FDE combo packs out there.
Yeah, but this is not primarily a video about loot crates, because as we get into this conversation, and I will drop us into this location right now, are they lying, Josh? Big question a lot of times now, as YouTube has seen more and more long-range content. As people publish more stuff, unfortunately, sometimes it takes a little bit more brain power to understand whether something is someone is being disingenuous and trying to inflate certain results, or did we just have a bad understanding of how something worked? And a lot of times when it comes to shooting long range specifically, and long range, I don't even know how people define it nowadays. 500 used to be long range for people. Shooting long range, there's a lot of like fisherman's tales, hunting stories type of vibe on, oh yeah, even what was the quote from Lethal Weapon? 1,000 yards in wild wind. I was probably one of the only people who could hit him with an AK. Something along those lines. And people regurgitate these things and try to one-up one another. It's just a natural tendency that us guys have. We like to have that type of back and forth with people. And so how do we know when someone is kind of going outside of that envelope of realistic performance, right? And that's something that matters a lot to us, because yeah, we do look at some memey weird things every now and then and definitely push it out of the envelope of its intended performance. However, sometimes we also want to get a better understanding of how these things work. So a little side story here, and I could touch back onto this later for a later audience. We started our first practical accuracy episode with an AK-103. Specifically, we started that because, well, we had one. It wasn't a good conversion, but it was a 103 conversion. And when I was in the military, it was constantly perpetuated with a lot of NCOs that the AK is no good past 200 yards, 200 meters. So then I knew that was false, because prior to joining the military, I was one of the weirdos in the mid 2000s who bought AKs and actually tried to shoot iron-sighted AKs past 200 yards. And I knew that the AKs could most certainly hit a 200-yard humanoid target. That is a non-issue. And so I knew that when soldiers were going out the wire, expecting that, hey, your AK is no good past 200 meters, then that would potentially lead to soldiers doing things that are slightly doing things with bad intel that could get them killed or get their unit lit up. And so I had a vested interest in wanting to delve into the practical accuracy of certain firearms and bring that to light. And a lot of this was a a discovery process. So during this process, a lot of things that Josh, especially through the comment section, through people talking on chat forums, on Instagram, and different places, it's getting harder and harder to discern whether a 7.6239 or 300 blackout can really shoot at these like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,000 yard distances, because obviously we have video footage of people doing that, right?
Yes.
So
ourselves included, Henry, and that's part of the conversation here today is, being honest about the realities of what the show and the practical accuracy course is and isn't, right?
Mhm.
Because you have to be realistic with your gear. And in today's age of fisherman's tale, sometimes you can see it, right? Like on the show, we demonstrate certain things, but the reality of the consistency of those things is also must be considered. It has to be considered. And whether or not things can be done repeatedly with a high level of accuracy and consistency versus, well, it went down this way and we happen to have it on camera. Those are two very different things. And that's a part of this that we need to sort of address and talk through here for sure.
Well, and also to add on to what Josh is saying, from a military perspective, a lot of times, and I know nobody out there reads manuals except for the nerds. Nobody likes to read manuals, and unless you're a nerd or you're going up for re-enlistment and you have to go to some board and regurgitate information, nobody tries to figure out why a max effective range published on a manual is published at a certain distance. Like, why is it 550 meters for the M4?
Something that I learned earlier this week.
Yeah. And so a lot of this is what we're trying to come back in this conversation and look at what is essentially the max effective range of a cartridge. And obviously you can go beyond that because there's a max effective range and a maximum range. And a maximum range is far greater, but your predictability is significantly decreased. Anyways. Oh, okay. We have a super chat
from Big Red Doggy. Henry, this is some inside baseball for you. They know you're a bit of an HK fanboy. Very true. Fact. True. Certain collections coming up for sale on. Oh, well, now everybody knows. Way to go. Now everybody knows.
Dude, I most certainly overspent this season. And as we're doing accounting work, Josh has definitely reminded me that, Henry, just lay off the gas pedal a little bit. We have enough to work on. You are dangerous, sir. Anyways, on the topic, here we go.
Yeah, I mean, this right here, Henry, the videos that are for fun, there's an overall conversation about like what is and isn't on YouTube for gun content. Like that's a conversation being had in the space, I think, over the last 4 weeks or so. But there is certainly a aspect of our show, whilst practical in nature, because you're physically seeing what we're capable of doing with the rifles. There are certainly things that are memey or goofier or funnier, like trying to push a Martini Henry to 500 yards, where Henry has to stop, pause the cameras, and clean the bore after every 2 shots. Yes, this is a thing that happened and is true.
So Josh hates these things. He is a very practical person by nature, although he buys way over the practical cost of things sometimes. But he comes up with a justification why he has to buy something. Whereas I find historical prominence in things, and I think that's super cool to own. And that's why I buy it. It's not because it's super practical and I'm going to be using a Martini Henry to defend my household upon the upcoming doomsday events. However, the Martini Henry is likely one of the more absurdly fun videos we've done. The owl survived at the 450-yard line. For those who don't know, I nearly zipped an owl with a 500 grain projectile coming out of an 1870s era Martini Henry that I brought back from Afghanistan. But the interesting thing is, upon debriefing the Martini Henry and talking to Rob over at British Muzzleloaders, yeah, it was actually performing pretty close to its intended use. Because remember, back then, in the late 1800s, in the Victorian era, soldiers were marching still in square formations and firing in files. And so when you're working that way, and your target is not that single point target, but rather an enemy that is approaching you, and you could fire at much greater distances. Like there are 1 kilometer kills, like 1,000-yard kills with Martini Henrys. You don't know which one of your guys did that, but one of them did that, obviously. So it's a different way of using technology, and the way we used it was absolutely improper to how they used it. I think they use companies and half companies. So it would have been a lot of men with Martini Henrys firing upon that array of targets right there at that point.
Mm-hmm. And yet you were able to hit it 500. And so one time.
The very last cartridge, too.
So as that's being digested, though, we have to be very cautious that the takeaway from that hit is not that you can do it and that you should be able to do it, because Henry did it this time on the show.
So some of this, let's go back. Some of this is like asking the question of how much of this is luck, right? So that being said, the Martini Henry, I only relegated that for 1 shot on the target to clear. This next one, however, Josh, proved the superiority of non-AR systems with iron sights.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously, if I was able to clear the 500-yard course with an iron-sighted SG-550 with ball ammunition, why in the world would you ever spend money on optics? On
Did you shoot
77
this clean? Was this clean?
Yes, this was for a long time, this was the only rifle that had cleaned the course with no misses.
Yep. And so to that point, Henry, like that adds an element to how the show is being watched and digested, right? Like this rifle performed phenomenally well. But what do you think, if you shot this again on camera for score, would you be able to do a completely clean run again?
Since I'm not going to do that anymore, the answer is obviously yes, and always yes. Clearly yes. I have no problems duplicating this again, but I don't want to destroy the value of my SG-550, so I shan't take it out again.
Interesting. Suspicious. In all reality, what we have done it, we shot it on Speedway. Now that's under time, so you're pushing the speed and whatnot. But it didn't stack up to a rifle that shot with no misses, right? It was just more of like an average service rifle performing as you might expect an average service rifle to perform, right?
I will say that comparing the SG-550 to the M16A2 system that I am way more familiar with, having way more training behind it, and a lot more trigger time, just squeezing that trigger. Even though we were shooting the same ammunition, my hit rates, even though the M16A2 technically performed worse than the 550 on the record course, I am way more confident at running the A2. Because remember, the 550, the iron sights top off at 400 meters, which isn't super far from 500 yards, granted. You know, it's not that far off from 500 yards, but that's a lot more work to have to put in order to collect that last hit. I didn't expect myself to go in the 550 and cleaning the course with no misses is the baseline. So absurdly fun, yes. Is this a realistic observation of how the Swiss 550 series rifles will perform every single time? I will admit no. However, could I do this again if you gave me a couple runs? Maybe. The chances are higher than an AK, I will tell you that. Now, the next one, however, the P90. This rifle cleared the service rifle course out to 450 yards, 411 meters. And that is on a oh, hey, look, Dimitri's here with us. Dimitri is the creator of the ACSS reticle. Great guy. Text him every now and then, and I crap talk him all the time. It's a love thing. So with the P90, however, shooting a essentially like 2,200 feet per second small 5.56 projectile, I didn't expect this to clear 300, but it went all the way out to 450. But let's say this was in an actual fighting event, or you needed some type of practical effect from it. How confident are you that the P90 at 450 will stop someone from doing things you don't want them to do?
Yeah, I mean, you got hits with it.
Yes, I got hits with it. But that's it, right? You know, it's a huge, giant question mark. And can I do this again? You know, I don't know. However, I did also include a couple different notable clearings here. But Josh, to your pride, the URGI, the Geissele URGI, which is the upper receiver group improved M4, it's essentially a free-floated 14.5 pin-in weld mid-length gas M4 system. So it is a militarized 3-gun rifle, in my opinion. I will put that out there. That is my opinion. It cleared with 0 misses on the 500-yard courses, running a Night Force ATACR 1-8. Can we do that again with that? Very yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
High degree of confidence that it could do that.
Right. Repeatedly. Right.
Yes. Even in wind.
Mm-hmm.
So, and on top of that, the next one that we also did was the TRG 42 with 300 Win Mag out to 1,000. Highly confident I could do that again, over and over again. That's not even close. That's at the mid range for the cartridge and the rifle to perform at.
Yeah.
At that.
Even if you dropped a round on either of those runs for like a wind call or whatever else, like the fact of the matter is, it would be within a percentage of accuracy, extremely close to being able to just run the course clean over and over and over again, right? And so, from that perspective, on the show, on our scoreboard, on our leaderboard, the URGI still sits equal to the SGG, right?
Yeah.
And so
the iron sighted, right?
That's right. And so again, a large component of what we want to sort of impart here is how to watch the content, what to observe, what to take away from these sessions, because you see what we're able to actually do on the range with the gun for the singular run in which we capture it. That doesn't mean every run. If Henry repeated it multiple times over, it may or may not have similar results. And it may or may not have similar results in a small spectrum of, margin of error. And it could also have massive margin of error, right? Depending upon which gun it is and what the environmentals are and what the conditions are, so on and so forth.
Well, I'll put it this way though. We've had like what Josh is trying to say, the score that the SG 550 or the Sturmgewehr 90 did was the same as the URGI with ATACR. So does that mean that these two, we have the same level of confidence in performing this task? One performed extremely well for what it is, and one was reflective of what it can do. But how do you qualify that? How do you quantify that? How do you put that into numbers? But before we get to actually how you do that, and this is an actual system that we learned how to figure out the max effective range and what you should be using your stuff for, Josh and I got humbled. Well, I got massively humbled right before we went to Adrian's class. And that's
with that said, just take a moment right now drop some likes on the video. All right. Get this out there so everybody can learn about Henry being humbled. Okay. This is important.
It's a lot of times, I mean, Josh and I think, I mean, this is me looking back at us and the way we talk about stuff. We try to be really introspective in nature. I think you have to in the competition world. Uh, you have to be looking around at what other people are doing and what your capabilities are and how you improve upon those capabilities. But for the longest time, we didn't really have a lot of other long range content on the internet. And so the more we did, the more I saw that some rifles could be pushed to doing some pretty crazy things. I started it was the opposite of the problem and why I started practical accuracy and wanting to show some of the rifles how they could surpass the limitations. I started shooting past the limitations of these rifles and thinking that I could do that no matter what. And sometimes wind is a bitch. Wind is a ruthless bitch. And so earlier, when we went out with a lovely Remington 700 SPS, and specifically we wanted to shoot Josh's base model Remington. Base model and Josh don't usually go hand in hand, so appreciate this moment. This was Josh's training rifle as he got into shooting long range. But the SPS is kind of one of those Walmart special, like baseline entry level Remington 700s. This one's in 308, so even more kind of run of the mill 20-inch barrel shooting out to 1,000. Done it a million times shooting 308 to 1,000. It's nothing special for me. I got humbled, and you'll see it when the video comes out. Because look at the wind. I mean, this was the wind flag. We were getting 25-mile-an-hour gusts. On top of that, similar time frame, and this is when the weathers are changing a lot here in Texas. You'll get to the range, and it's a bit of a it's deceiving because you get there, and at the crack of dawn, usually you get like a lull for a second. Even if it's not zero wind, it may get toned down for a little bit. But then I think once the air starts mixing, the temperature starts mixing some of the air, you start getting a lot of turbulence pushing in. So same. This was what the wind flag looked like when we were shooting AKs, Josh. Because
7.62 by 3.9 AKs.
Because of course I decided that I was going to be very clever and logistically plan only one cartridge to bring out there, so we didn't have to have a million different cartridges into a box and forget anything. I just had one ammo can of loose 7.6239, so we had the full third world experience of grabbing ammo out of a loose can, jamming it into magazines, and just shooting it. The 103 passed the course. The Wasser, it could have passed the course. But compared to some other 7.6239 rifles, there was a certain point at the course that was very apparent that either that was a magical spot for me to lose all concentration, or the particular pairing of the rifle and cartridge was definitely having issues. And so the big thing is, as we walked into Adrian's class, we wanted to figure out how are we going to present this, because this is something interesting for us to look at. How do you not overestimate your capabilities or your equipment's capabilities? But on that note, as we're talking about equipment, Joshua, the loot crates are back at slateBlackIndustries.com. What are loot crates, you may ask? The Scav boss, upon one of the maps, turns out, has been stashing a lot of products from Slate Black Industries. A lot of these things are experimental colors, polymers that pass the QC, obviously physically pass the QC, but may be off on pigmentation from what we usually provide at Slate Black Industries. And so those, as they are produced, instead of just destroying them, we are going to pass the savings on to you guys. And this is being sold under cost. Basically at the price of one product, you're going to get 3 or more per order. Dealer's pick, well, it's not it's going to be the guys at the warehouse who picks which one goes into which, right? But you'll get basically 3 times the product per one cost that you pay. That is 1 unit cost for one product. And so we try to do this every now and then when we have enough like internal production, sort of not screw ups, but happy little mistakes made. We're talking about colors. And we sort of set them aside to build loot crates down the road. So
I actually have some old Gen 1 SBI colors in this one. So if you've been itching for the Gen 1 stuff, you know.
Yeah, so the green's a little lighter color on those. The tan is closer to like old school FDE, like Iraqi.
Yeah, instead of Coyote.
Yeah, like Iraqi Freedom FDE. So Iraqi Freedom. That's funny. So anyways, go check out SlateBlackIndustries.com. Pick up a loot crate if you have like a secondary rifle you need a kit out. Let's see. EMH has a right idea here. If you're going to Krylon your stuff anyways and you needed something to hold on to, this is perfect. Save yourself some money, get a little bit more stuff to help you push your trading out there. Anything else, Josh?
No. Let's roll in. But one of the things that I want to ask you, Henry, is do you think that this was, when we went out, when we started these 2 days, I think there's a little bit of further exploration into the getting humbled moment. I want to tighten the screws on you a little bit for this one, but also on myself. Okay. I'm in the vice with you.
Okay.
When we showed up on the day and it was gusty, it was windy, I had 0 concerns going up to like start shooting. I'm like, this is going to be fine. This is not going to be a problem at all. We've done this a bunch of times over. This is not going to be an issue. I think you were the same way. Specifically with the AKs. And I think that there's probably a bit of this where we've had a lot of success shooting at this point, where in recent years, especially, we can take the same gun out that we had maybe 4 or 5 years ago, take it back out. And in most cases, it's performing materially better because we've improved as shooters and as distant shooters or as a team or whatever else. Do you think that there was a bit of believing the hype, like believing your own hype, going up there and doing it? I think so. I mean, I felt like we couldn't, sometimes you're out there and it's just like, you feel like you can't miss until you start missing a lot.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's, from military side, I mean, it's what you look at some nations that only do exercises and they don't deploy. And the exercises, it's kind of like gamers, from your world, they start trying to pre-game things. They start figuring out the system and building confidence on a system that they're familiar with until something changes sufficiently to point out what they need work on. And this is one of those things. I mean, wind is one of those things that we shoot in all the time. But thinking back at it, the AKs that did well in wind are what? 5.45. The AK-105, the AK-74, the AK-S-74, the Spetsnaz AK-S-74, all of those things, they're AKs. They do just fine in wind. I mean, and then we're used to shooting AKs in wind, so it's not an iron sight problem. It's not a problem that the system we're unfamiliar with. But we didn't think much about it as we stepped into 7.6239 as the entire shooting order on a 25-mile-hour gust day. I mean, you asked me on the offside, yeah, I could tell you a couple problems that we could run into, but at the moment, I was just, let's just get this over with, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, same thing with the bolt actions. I mean, I shoot 20-inch 308s all the time, whether it's semi-auto or whether it's bolt action. And on top of that, even the G3s are 18 inches. Even we've shot a 16-inch M110K1 out to 1,000. Video coming next year, by the way. And a lot of these things put together, like, okay, I mean, this is not an issue to reach 1,000. However, there are certain elements that could change things. And these are the reasons why we're pointing these out to ourselves and wanting to bring it to everybody, is because this helps us this helps us logistically plan for things. Like if this is a no fail, you have to do this as a task. Maybe you want to consider something that has less variations, or that you are risking that thing failing less. So
what I would leave this with as we get into talking a little bit more about the session we had with Adrian is just remember that what people put out on YouTube is what people want you to see. Right? Like there's an editorial period where people can determine whether or not they're going to publish content, right? So
yes,
they put out stuff that they want you to see. And so when you start to think about the realities of what can and can't be done, or the repeatability of what can and can't be done, just remember that that is true, right? That what you are being shown is been curated for that purpose.
Yes. I mean, so I will say this for us. Every now and then we would pull a run before. We've done that because sometimes if we're unconfident with something that we did, is it something we did wrong? Does the rifle does it need a better look at what it is? We pulled them before, but we always reference to it and afterwards, or we will mention it as we pull it. I have worked with content creators who would do things like there's a content creator, I helped him shoot groupings at one point. And this is tying into like a one MOA all day long idea. Him, along with a lot of viewers of them, would expect that any AR would do one MOA or better. So when I just go sit down and shoot a group, I just shoot a group. I'm expecting, oh, this is what it did. You're going to publish it. Good job. I started finding the same group that I shot with calipers on top covering one of the shots to make it a sub-MOA grouping. So when you're saying, Josh, that some people will publish things that they want people to see, I completely agree with you on that. Yes.
Answer to this question, yeah. We took the rifle out like 3 or 4 times and we're all over the place with it. And we couldn't quite sort out what was going on. That's a little different than what Henry's describing, where there was actually a mechanical problem that we needed to figure out, like the gun wasn't performing correctly. But there have been other runs where like we shoot the rifle and we watch it back afterwards in post-production. We go, I don't know if we did justice to this rifle on this run because it didn't necessarily perform particularly well, and we should give it another look. And in most of those cases, I have seen that the result of going back and giving it another look generally results in a better result, probably because we're paying more attention to it. Like we as end users inputting the fundamentals are being more aware of what we're doing. And I think that results in generally better results. But in those cases, specifically to Henry's point, we try to also throw up the old runs, whether it's on the Patreon back end or History of Weapons of War or whatever it is, where we have some sort of detail about, or even in the main video, we'll reference back to the fact that we tried it before and it didn't perform as well. So
yeah, so a part of that, when we do pull runs, there's a distinctive fault behind it. For the Scar, the way we were running it, it was eating the optics. It ate 3 optics of yours, didn't it, Josh?
Well, no, I mean the main issue was that
the screw kept on coming loose.
Yes,
but once
yes, there was an issue where it was user induced. I didn't have the mount tight enough. Like the QD levers were like loose, so it was slightly loose in the Picatinny, and the whole optic got rocked as a result of that, and it ate the optic. It was only once, but yes, it did happen like that.
But it's one thing. It's one thing to, because nobody wants to watch a million different things of user-induced failures.
Precisely.
What I'm more so talking about is that some people are purposefully editing things to make the rifle look better, to make the firearm perform better, or make a cartridge that is not supposed to perform a certain way perform better.
Yes. And the
So
problem with that is it absolutely sets radically poor expectations for everybody else. Case in
Mhm.
point, our M110 stuff that we just posted, or the PSA 110, sorry, where the groupings we shot were 1.5 to 2 inches with match ammo. And then we showed that it can easily shoot the course.
Mhm.
Like, and that's but the perception people had was that absolutely no shot. It's not going to be able to do the course because the groups are too big, because it should be shooting 1 inch, because that's what has been propagated as this standard that cannot be broken from. Now, with that said, it's probably worth us. This is a relatively new rifle, right? Like now it's probably got maybe 400 on it or so, maybe 500 rounds total.
I've been pretty busy since we shot that, so
Okay,
not
so
yet,
maybe it's
not yet,
creeping up
not
above
yet.
that.
I'm working there, not yet.
But point being, there's going to be a time where we come back and see how the rifle settled in, and that's probably valuable for us to do that. But this is what we saw straight away, and it still performed just fine. All right.
Yeah. So
Take us to the course, Henry. Let's talk about what we learned from Adrian.
So Adrian, it is this bearded gentleman. Josh looks like he has a mustache. It's the one in between Josh and I in this image. Adrian is a local to us. He actually lives fairly close to me. I mean, I should see him more often and hang out with him and his family. Awesome guy. We met him at the range, and he was a sniper when he was in the army. It's kind of crazy. Like I felt that I felt like I always perpetually feel like I'm a younger guy, but turns out everyone reminds me that I'm some like older uncle now. But as I left,
There's some gray up here, Henry.
it's by choice. I do that on purpose. As I left the army, like we have like a couple, like maybe 2-3 years we were overlapping, but it was kind of like one went out, one went in, and he was an army sniper. He kind of made a reputation of being a Y guy, which anyone in the military knows that the Y guys typically, especially on the enlisted side, typically get a couple more comments than the other ones. But because of that, he spent a lot of time delving into the why certain things are a certain way. And specifically, one of the big things that I learned from the course, we took a private tune-up course with Adrian to kind of tune up some of our standardize some of our skill sets that we've developed and infused a little bit more of the sniper side onto it as well. Very informative course, but one of the biggest things that we caught from it was how do you determine max effective range of a firearm? Because, and I know this, I never asked this question. I mean, I'm glad he was the person who asked, why is there a max effective range to a firearm? From the ordnance side, you always had a posted max effective range and a posted effective range. And when you're planning your ranges, if you're planning your operations, assaults, you're trying to move your pieces up and do whatever, you always have a consideration of what is the max effective range of your weapon system and the operators, and what is the max range. But max effective range was always most important. And so we started talking about the characteristics of max effective range and what is realistic versus what is fun/entertainment. Not necessarily just what you see on the internet or on videos of like people shooting extremely long ranges with a soda can at 700 yards with a 22 rifle. Like, awesome. Clearly, that's not realistic. I still watch it. I mean, it's still fun. It's still interesting.
I want to see if it can be. I want to see if somebody tags it. It's
interesting. It's interesting. That is entertainment. On the realistic side, if that were the case, trust me, from a logistical perspective, the military would very much want to ship 500 bricks of ammunition instead of really heavy and large pieces like crates of ammunition to supply militaries. That would solve a lot of logistical issues and save a lot of money on fuel. But why not? Because 22 does not fit in the realistic it does not provide a realistic effect that an actual cartridge like a 5.56 or a 308 does. But this varies between the different ranges and stuff. And so one of the systems that Adrian, through this day, had showed us was his Max Effective Triad. Now, as he was going through this type of stuff, like part of his course was hard on the shooting, hard on the working on win calls, working on the hard skills, right? The theory side, and I didn't fall asleep. I'm notorious for in classrooms, right? But it was really interesting. But I was not expecting to do as much classroom work, but the classroom work here ended up being the work that I'm taking away from it way more than just the hard skills, I would say. So what was did you want to add anything to the course and Adrian's?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll hit like really briefly on an overall AR before we get into the specifics of this particular piece of content, which Adrian is kind enough to allow us to share publicly, because it's obviously something that is part of his paid course. I am a very confident rifle shooter when it comes to shooting carbine. I know exactly what I want to do and how I want to do it and how I want to apply pressures to the gun and hold the gun and everything else from my competition days. So for me to learn how to do something a little different or to be challenged to do something different, to the why guy comment, that is very much me. I will adopt it quickly and absolutely if somebody gives me a good reason why and demonstrates to me why it's better than what I'm doing. And within the first mag of shooting, Adrian adjusted. I'll just give one example. Adrian adjusted one small thing about what my firing hand was doing. It was just where I was applying pressure to the gun and the angle in which I was applying the pressure with my firing hand. And he got me going from relatively quick shooting out at 300, 400, 500 yards with a 5.56 gun, pop, 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 pop on a target, to, you saw it, Henry, literally being able to double, just tap, 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 and just impacting all of these rounds. And that's a testament to somebody who is really in tune with what they've got going on and being able to articulate it and convey it to somebody who is very hesitant to try stuff that's different because I have a very ingrained way of doing things at this point. So I would say a very valuable session just from that one tweak that was in the first mag. Never mind the rest of the stuff, which I got plenty of value out of, but that was just one small taste of how that went. And what I'm going to do here, Henry, is you get into the classroom portion. I'm going to drop Adrian's deets in the chat, and you guys should. Adrian has a YouTube and an Instagram. You guys should check him out if you don't already follow Sidewinder.
Drop it into the comment, the actual video comment.
Yeah,
on the screen. All right, so the Max Effect Triad. I mean, that sounds like a weapon of mass destruction. So the Max Effect Triad is Adrian's way of balancing three particular items that a weapon system and ammunition combination can put out. And by balancing by figuring out the distances for all three of these, you're able to work out what a max effective range is. And those three characteristics are going to be velocity, energy, and the mechanical limits of the rifle. Now, what are they? I'm glad you came, because I shall preach about all three of these characteristics. So first of all, velocity, right? Velocity is going to be one of those primary, big things that you look at. It was going to be one of those big things that you would look at as you're shooting long range. I mean, velocity is the key. Now, there's caveats to that, because we're primarily dealing with centerfire rifles, centerfire high power rifles. This particular graphic that you see right here is from a gentleman out in South Africa who deals with a lot of air gunning. And look, I get it's not the cool thing in North America to do, but the principle of ballistics for air guns are still there, and it's still very interesting because as you look at a projectile, and you can see the projectile right here. You see my cursor right here. You can see this is the projectile in subsonic, transonic, and supersonic. Well, what are we looking at though? That wake right there is the supersonic bow, and the sound, because it's going faster than sound, is actually traveling behind the projectile. And so there's a wake that goes behind the projectile, and as the projectile is traveling, it's traveling faster than sound, right? But the projectile at some point will slow because of drag. You've got a projectile going through air. It would be the same thing if it were a boat going through water. You have drag that slows the projectile down, and as it slows down, that sonic wave behind it starts catching up to it, which you can see right here. The sonic wave starts to catch up to it, and as it's going into the transonic what am I saying? Range. The transonic wave is actually right on the projectile and has the most turbulent, has the most effect on providing more turbulence for the projectile, which means it's in an unstable state as it's passing from supersonic into the subsonic zone. Now, in this gentleman's video that I've got the link down here, it's interesting because he also interviewed an airline pilot. And the airline pilot was talking about how they tend to travel either supersonic or subsonic and not in the transonic zone, because you start getting way more turbulence and it wastes way more fuel, and you basically risk your aircraft a whole lot more. And so they avoid the turbulent part where you're like crossing back into the transonic zone. So if you think of it, if that's how it feels like in an aircraft, like think of a projectile going through and hitting and getting hit from behind as the supersonic, as the what am I saying? The supersonic wave catches up to it and destabilizes it.
The wave of the
sound barrier. The sound barrier comes back to destabilize it. It's getting very unstable, and then it passes into the subsonic, and then it's once again it's somewhat stable again. But that transonic zone is a zone that destabilizes it as it goes on. And so when we're looking at the velocity, right, we're trying to isolate what is the lead edge of the transonic range. Again, this is specifically for high power rifles. So you're talking about this back here. You're talking about stuff that Josh and I typically show on the channel a lot. What you saw at the very beginning, the MP5 SD, is actually subsonic the entire time, so the projectiles never reach the transonic range. So that's an interesting thing to point out. And so as your supersonic projectiles are traveling at a highly predictable supersonic distance, as the projectile is traveling supersonic on the green zone right here, this is basically the velocity that gives you the effective range and the highly predictable flight path for the projectile. Once it hits the transonic range, you start getting a lot of turbulence and it starts destabilizing a bit. But once you pass through it, you'll get into the subsonic zone, which, once again, you're past you're going slower than the speed of sound, and you're not in the transonic turbulent zone anymore. And your predictability at that point is lower, not because it's going slower, but because it went through the transonic range to where it was destabilized, and then that affects a wider cone of fire on the very end. And so, bottom line is, velocity is key. What we're trying to identify here is the lead edge of the transonic range to give us the most highly predictable speed as it goes through the supersonic range. Any questions on that?
No, I think that there's a piece here that we have to hit on more directly, Henry, right? And it's what the highly predictable nature of that supersonic range is. This is the area where, sort of to reference Adrian's commentary to us when he was teaching, that's the zone where all of the fundamentals that you're imparting on the rifle at the shooter's position, like that's where all of that stuff is going to basically provide you a highly predictable place that you're being able to place the projectile downrange, where you don't then have input by literally sound waves disrupting the flight of the projectile. And when you look at it from this perspective, the takeaway that we had from this session very much came back to the idea of when you're still supersonic, that's where the round should be highly predictable and you should be able to hit what you're shooting at. Once you get past the supersonic area and you go into the transonic zone, specifically right where that lead edge of transonic starts, at the very beginning of where the projectile may begin to become transonic. Everything past that is, to quote Adrian, sort of like the fun zone. It's where you can absolutely score hits, but the predictability and the repeatability of those hits decreases
dramatically, exponentially. So one thing I wanted to show, Dimitri's out there writing. I mean, Dimitri loves. I learned a lot from talking to Dimitri, and this is right in his wheelhouse too. So when he's correcting us, when it goes transonic, it'll change its angle of attack and BC, so ballistic coefficient. Yes, and that gets factored in ballistic computers. But the big takeaway here is that transonic range does a lot to change the predictability of the projectile, and exponentially after that.
And to quote Adrian, this is from a text he just sent, so he's out there lurking. He's lurking. He basically says we have no ability to measure sound turbulence. So the effect of that on the cone of fire is what makes it unpredictable.
All right. So that was the velocity piece. Do you have any more on the velocity piece? Mm-hmm. And we'll get back to that, because I'm going to apply some of this stuff to this, because right now, right behind me, you have my beloved Arctic Warfare. It's the rifle that's the collectible rifle that I shoot probably the most, right, Josh? I mean, you've been around me the most. Like, I tend to bring this out whenever I want to.
It's a hard one to not bring out, Henry.
Yeah. So if we're looking at the velocity side of the Max Effect Triad, right, you see right here it's highlighted in yellow. That's about a 20% north of when it starts hitting the actual transonic line. So that's when you start seeing the wake hitting it, starting to come back in effect on the projectile. Now, this is my understanding, my thought. As you're going through that process, I think the longer you stay in that transonic range, the more effect it has on the projectile. So it's not that it hits this point and it automatically, just snaps and goes crazy, right? It's a gradual process, and it could be exponential. So this is highly dependent on the projectile, but this is where it is for my particular rifle, shooting that particular load. And yeah, this is it.
So that yellow line there, Henry, on your ballistic table aligns with, you pop back over into the previous transonic graph, that aligns with that lead, right where you were. That aligns with that line right there, right? The lead edge of the transonic range.
Right. So that's what we're looking for when we're trying to look at the velocity side of the Max Effective Triad. There's going to be more specifically to draw at the Arctic Warfare. We're going to get to that, but we need to get to the terminal effects first. And I think terminal effects is one of those things that Josh was actually less familiar with. Not that you don't know what it is, but less considered on your side.
I would never have thought through, because again, what I'm doing is target shooting for the most part. So I wouldn't have known to look at foot-pounds of energy being delivered at different distances and have known what was particularly relevant or not at those distances.
All right. Yes. So what we're trying to talk about here is, we see comments on this all the time in the comment section, because people are talking about, oh, you hit a 5.56 at 600 yards. There's going to be no energy to take someone down anyways. you will be surprised. But at the same time, if the target is armored, that's potentially a different story. So what Adrian did on his side is he looked up the FBI's testing records, and their standard for an effective defensive cartridge is 350 foot-pounds at the floor to have terminal effect on a two-legged target. Let's say this is YouTube, so you know how to interpret that. So at that 350 foot-pound, you're going to have some effect on two-legged targets. But you step it up. You look at some animals, let's say like in Texas, you get some feral hogs out there. It's not that they have tough skin, but what I've seen having hunted for a while before I joined the military, animals tend to have a greater sense to live. I don't know if that makes sense, but animals tend to fight a lot more than human beings when they're shot. If they could make it, they will try to make it out. So I think the idea here and the right to numbers, the 500 foot-pound and 1,000 foot-pound numbers are from the I think is National Parks and Services on hunting. What the recommended cartridge terminal energy delivery would be in order to take medium game and then large game. So large game being like your mules, your bears, elk, the big things. And basically you're just trying to calculate how much energy you're going to dump into the target. Now, here's the complicated thing about this. Projectile design matters. Shot placement matters with stuff like this. This is a raw number that we're trying to look at what kind of energy do we want to retain? Because if you don't have the energy, yes, you could use shot placement and stuff like that, but you just simply don't have the energy to deliver. But if you do have the energy, you could still work on shot placement and different projectile designs. So this is a metric that is not the defining end-all metric, but it is a vital metric to determine how much energy do you have to expend on the target. And so if we're looking at the energy that you want to expend, let's say I want to look at either pigs or an armored target. I'm looking at minimum 500 foot-pounds that I want to deliver. For the Arctic warfare back here, shooting my M118LR projectiles, I'm looking at 1,082 yards or 990 meters at the longest distance to where it still retains that 500 foot-pound to deliver. Now, again, that's for an armored two-legged target. If it's unarmored, then it goes farther to, it slowly drops to 350. But right now we're looking at an armored target. So 10,000 or not 10,000, 1,000, 1,082 yards or 990. Now, once we'll get to the last piece is going to be the mechanical limitations. Now, Adrian's, this is where Josh and I had a little bit more of an idea, thought put into the Max Effect Triad. Adrian tends to look at this as 10 mils because 10 mils is a very manageable range to quickly work on from a long range shooter perspective. Now, my optic does have 26 mils worth of adjustment. So I'm going to base this on the max adjustability of my optical system. The rifle is also shooting 0.8 MOA or better. Josh has seen it do much better than that, but conservatively, I think this is a pretty average between that particular load and some of the other cartridges that I've been shooting. And if you reflect that on the ballistic chart, 900, so 10 mils of elevation is right around 900 yards or 823 meters. If you apply the first and second revolution that my Schmidt does, it would be either at 1082, same as the distance for the 500 foot-pounds at 990 meters, so almost 1,000. Or if you go all the way to the second revolution, that would put you to the trajectory for 1,500 yards. So We take all of that and put it into what we see here, the velocity, energy, and mechanical limits. All of a sudden, we have a triangle that has some of the limitations of this particular rifle. When some of the limitations that this rifle may start to show as it goes to those distances. Velocity wise, it starts hitting transonic, the lead edge of the transonic range at 961 yards. On the energy wise, it starts going less effective and under the 500 foot-pounds at 1082 yards. And then mechanical limitations, I honestly wouldn't even consider this, but if we're looking at the 10 mil operations, then it's 900 yards. But really, with a nice optic like that, less so, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think a good point of consideration on the mechanical accuracy here is like whether or not you have MOA built into your mount, whether or not you have extra revolutions of travel in the turret, and also the standard number of mil drops you have within a reticle. And so I think Adrian's number on that was sort of a loose balancing around some of those factors, not necessarily just about a precision sniper rifle that has the capability to have put on 26 mils worth of elevation. Sort of like a standard rule, I would say. And again, I think it's probably worth mentioning also that when you look at the energy calculation here, also the like loose standard rules for these categories and numbers. And actually, even when you look at the velocity data, that what we saw on range for lead edge of transonic is that we were able to probably hit that spot and then a little bit further before we started to see destabilization. And then after that spot, there was a point, using my gun as an example, by the data tables for my 5.56 gun, it should have gone to the lead edge of transonic right short of 700, about 650 to 700 range. But I was able to get repeatable hits at 800. And then right after 800, all of a sudden it was like I could hit the target, but it wasn't repeatable. And I'd have one that was on the left edge, one on the right edge, one slightly over the top, one at the base of the target, shot after shot with a very similar hold. And that's where we were able to relatively easily go, okay, like there it is. We're seeing the effects of passing through the transonic sound barrier.
Now, one thing to keep in mind, again, this is for center fire, high power rifles. It's different when you're talking about 22s. A lot of match 22 shooters, like NRL 22s guys, they shoot subs because they want to entirely avoid the transonic range. The same video that talked about the air gunners, they're the same. A lot of the your high end competition air guns, they try to keep it right underneath to keep it subsonic so they could have a more predictable flight path. So I would imagine that affects air gun pellets even more because the BC on those things are just absolutely atrocious. I mean, you're shooting like a flat-faced or a conical thing downrange. That's just not even close. But they do have a shuttlecock back. Sorry, one thing I need to bring up. I think I accidentally said that I would recommend shooting mules. I definitely meant mule deer. And not the hardworking mule on the farm. So sorry about that. If that were
well, Henry. So just back to the mechanical piece here, right? Like if you think about your old super sniper that you had queued up on your Remington 700, that probably had about 10 mils per revolution of the turret, right?
Less.
No, okay. Less. So that's a good example then of like where it's not a stinking Schmidt with multiple revolutions capable in an MOA mount that's going to allow you to dial it up 26 mils, right? Like but the point here is you have to look at what your rifle and your tool is capable of doing, not just from, we talk specifically about the mil come ups and what you could actually like dial on to be able to hit. But also I think again, the reference towards the actual base accuracy of the firearm, even if it still has the velocity needed, and even if it still has the energy needed or that you want when you get to the target, if you're shooting a rifle that's 2.5 or 3 inches wide, but you're trying to hit a target at 1,000 that is 8 inches wide, like you're not going to be able to repeatably do that. right? So there's a mechanical element to the rifle's core accuracy as well here that I think is important to be considering.
Yeah, so let's look at this little table that we've come up for the Arctic Warfare. My particular one, 20-inch barrel, 308, shooting M118 LR, this particular entire combo. And that chart was trued. So I would confidently put this at a 1,000. That would be my max effective range for this particular piece. Now, I know the velocity, it says like 961 yards. I would be confident that I could stretch the final 40 yards for that because it's just at the beginning of the transonic range. However, sometimes it seems like when projectiles are going through transonic at the very beginning, depending on wind, it seems to get a little bit more kind of weird as it goes through. But since it's at the lead edge of the transonic range, it hasn't gone through the entire thing. I don't think it's been affected as much. Also, these are high BC 30 cal projectiles too. So like you're talking about bow tail, hollow points, nice everyday long range projectiles. So I would put this at 1,000. That would put my confidence level on it.
Yep. Now, how do we contrast that against something that
aha, the best, Josh? So
this is where this was really illuminating for us when we were in the class, because we were able to, Adrian was walking us through these elements of running through, the guns that we were shooting, which were precision setups. And we had this aha moment where you pulled up the 7.62x39 table because of some of the issues we had talked about having, a few weeks prior. And you were like, look.
Yes. So as a reminder, the mighty AKM, or the Wasser in this case, which is a version of the AKM, is firing Russian-made 123 grain steel case standard ball ammunition. Out of this particular rifle, I'm getting about 4 MOA on the accuracy. Shooting iron sights. So let's look at the table right here, right? So this is a ballistic table that I had. Granted, I just plugged a generic 7.6239 speed into this, and I didn't have the actual projectiles BC. Like, I didn't have the actual projectile on the ballistic computer, but they did have one that was the PPU loading, which to me is close enough for government work. Let's go. So this is a PPU projectile, 7.62x39 at a just a generic posted speed. I need to look up the actual speed that I had saved this under. Actually, if you continue. And this is what we got on the chart. You can see pushing down. Oh, let's look at it this way. Do you remember what the battle sight, the AK's P setting battle sight is, Josh?
Is it 300 or 400?
300 for 7.6239. Okay. Right. So what that means is highly predictable flight path. You set it on a P setting, aim at the belt buckle. You should hit anywhere from the head all the way down to the belt buckle in a combat setting. And that's how the Russian military had, or the Soviet military had, aligned this particular thing. However, later on when they progressed to the AK-74, you remember what the P setting was?
That's where it's 400, right?
400 meters. And so anywhere between 400 meters all the way back, you can set it on the P setting, aim at the belt buckle, and you're supposed to hit roughly this distance. And that's very useful, because if you look back at leaving World War II, when the M43 cartridge was developed, in World War II, it was posted that 200 meters was the average combat distance for soldiers. So if you have a rifle that you set a P setting and you could hit anywhere from the belt buckle up, 30 rounds in the magazine, highly predictable between those distances, that's a pretty dang good infantry rifle. Again, the cartridge was made during the war. The M43 cartridge was made during the war and tested and tested to a sense that they would take the cartridges and try to hide it so people wouldn't pick it up and realize what the Russians were doing. I digress. This is not a long-range rifle, however. And On our course, we've shot multiples of these and still cleared it. But if you look at it, let's say we're looking at an armor target. So 500 foot-pounds is what we're looking at. That distance is somewhere between 400 and 425, right? I think we'll work that thing through in a bit. And then the lead edge of the transonic range was just right around like 475-ish. So that's when you start getting a little bit of effect from the sound, the wake catching up to the projectile. Now, factor in also that this particular projectile has like very low BC.
The BC of a spitwad. Got it.
Not great on the BC. BC is ballistic coefficient. That tells you how streamlined a projectile is, and the higher the number, the better. And this is a very low number compared to other rifle projectiles. So factor that in, right? Let's look at the next one. So let's put these numbers in. 475 yards, 434 meters. You're reaching the velocity edge. And so smart to put a combat distance 100 meters in front of that. That's a smart thing to do. Energy 375 to affect armored targets. I could look up what the unarmored targets are, but also, that's an armored target at 375 having an effect on them. Smart. That's a good distance. 300 meters is still a good distance to place on there for max effect. Now, the mechanical limitations is one of those. LOL.
It has 1,000-yard sight, Henry.
It has 1,000-yard sights. You are correct, Josh. Like, the sights go out to 1,000. However, on this particular rifle, the sights are also crooked. So I guess if you're like doing like a sideways.
All right. So what's the actual reality of this situation? Show us the real mechanical.
The reality of the situation is like shooting iron sights. Obviously, you can shoot at distance. Like I've done it many a times, right? But when we're talking about velocity and the energy delivered, specifically when there is wind involved, Josh, a lot of the issues that we were running into with 7.6239 transpired whenever we hit the 450, 500-yard distances.
Which very particularly, like, again, let's not conflate two things here. Like the ability to deal with the wind and the BC related problems of this projectile and how bad it gets hit by wind, different than the crossing of the transonic zone where you have issues with the turbulence associated with that, right? So there's two different problems. But what we have seen routinely as we've shot these things on our show and on the course and everything else is that around 450 to 500 tends to be this space where we start to lose predictability, plus the issues of wind when layered on top of that make it exceptionally hard to shoot this in a predictable fashion. And that is when we think back to where we addressed, getting humbled at a few weeks back and thinking we were going to go walk on air and slay the 500-yard steel army in 25-mile-an-hour gusts with these AKs. That's about the area where we started to get our butt kicked, was around 450.
Now, Josh, I did sink a 700-yard iron sight shot on the turkey, though. So,
and how was the bullet?
Indeed, it was. By the time we got to the target, the impact was sideways. It was a sideways impact, so it was very unstable by the time it reached that distance. So there's going to be, this is a difficult part because people are going to say, "Hey, but I saw this online, but I saw so and so who took a 300 blackout or a 7.62 by 3.9 at like 6, 7, 8, 900 yards, and it looked like they didn't have any misses." On the video, they didn't show any misses. Yes, but I'm not there. I mean, if there's a different way of making 7.62 by 3.9 shoot past these transonic ranges and do exceedingly well in wind, that's something that I don't know and I would very much want to learn. But as far as people who are into ballistics, and Dimitri's one of them, ACSS Dimitri, like talking to him, he did a lot of research on these things before he developed the ACSS the trees. And he also has seen the same thing from by 39. He's in the desert too, so he sees even more of an effect that wind has on these things.
Yeah, and ultimately it goes back to your point, like, or to what we discussed at the onset, like, just question some of this stuff if you see some of these things taking place, to the validity of what's being shown. But moreover, if somebody can physically do it and is capable of doing it, there's some really, like, we are definitely not the best long range shooters on YouTube. There are some guys who are unbelievably skilled, and maybe they do have the secret sauce, So just really quick then, just a couple of supers came in, Henry. Garrett, we appreciate it, man. Means a lot. Thank you very much. And Rhett to play. Yes. You've arrived for the AK portion of this episode.
All right, so one I wanted to bring up. You got him? Red to play. We're talking about AKs, brother. I saw M26 Lemon Grenade was in too. That's Brad, our SME from the M16A2 episode. So Brad's a huge AK guy. Oops. Good to see you, Brad, out there. But shall I use my kings? It's 20 past midnight here in the UK, and we're talking shaggy AKs. Come on, guys. Let's get some Gucci kit talk on. That's your realm, by the way, Josh, Gucci kit. But AKs suck balls.
And Ret to Play also lets us know one of the small portion of the audience by the analytics standards. Welcome.
So, AKs, I think when you declare things like AKs suck balls, it's all relative. What do you want it to do? Like, if your target's only like 200 meters away, AKs will do that. Like, that's not a difficult shot for AKs.
Mm-hmm.
But it certainly isn't something that you could take and shoot it and present it to the world that it's just as good as a 308 sniper rifle. I mean, because mechanically, look at this. Look at this versus this. Just look at the numbers. It's double the distance, more than double the distance, to have a stable and predictable impact and an effective energy transfer onto the target. Now, yes, turns out the 10 mil is less than the AK's 1,000 meter sight, but that is neither here nor there. The main thing is, like, what are you trying to do with it, with your kit? And being very honest with your kit's abilities and I don't want to say inabilities, but limits of its abilities, and being able to understand that it has a range, that it peaks its performance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And lean on that. If you have a 700-yard target, yes, you could dump your AK's mag at it. Will you get a hit? I don't know. Better, maybe. And even if it's an SPR, a 5.56 SPR, now you're going to have issues with the energy transfer, but at least you have a much more predictable projectile hitting your target.
Or a 5.45 AK, right? For example, as a contrast, right?
Yeah.
To that end, Rob at AKOU has posted a number of videos with his like SPR'd or decked out, it Zastava or whatever else in 5.45, hammering targets out at those ranges. Sure. And it's, again, like, that's a different projectile, right? So it doesn't fit if Henry returns to the table for the by 39 or this by 7.62. It doesn't. These are different numbers, right? These are different numbers.
Yeah, but what we're talking about here is, like, in the bottom line, like, look at that max effective triad and figure out what distance does your firearm peak at before you try to say this is suitable for the task or not. And
you know what, with that, Henry, like, that's the point that Adrian sort of worked backwards while he was going through this with us, was you can then assess with a given projectile, with a given barrel length, or thus translating into velocities, really where there are these sort of like call them like arbitrary, but not arbitrary lines being drawn. And the thing that I remember, like the number of people who have told us or talked to us, oh yeah, I shoot my 5.56 12-inch gun out to 800 yards. And it's like, yep. But also like there's pieces of it that we know aren't hitting the trifecta in terms of what makes sense.
Yes. I mean, that let me pull that back up. It all comes down to being honest with what you know and what you've seen. I mean, now some people may not know, right? They experienced it once. Just also understand what someone's experience level is while you're talking to them. I mean, you don't have to be mean and call someone's inexperience out and make fun of them, but just understand like who you're talking to and who consider your source and what kind of information you're getting it from.
And the flip of that as well, to the point that you and I sort of opened with here, we can easily say like, oh yeah, well, we've shot the 5.56 gun here, we shot it to 1,000. And that makes us very confident that we're capable to do it. But at the same time, like there's a piece of that where the consistency of being able to do that over and over repeatably on different days with different weather conditions, with different weather, like it's not there, right?
Yes.
And we have to be real about what that is.
I think so. This type of stuff is less critical for someone who's shooting for recreation. If you don't hit a target on when we go film, boohoo, we didn't hit the target. Frankly, at this point, I mean, when people start new YouTube channels, they get pressured to build credibility, so they will doctor their stuff a little bit. Not saying everybody will. Some people will doctor their stuff a little more to appear to drive certain things, to catch the views and stuff like that. We've done this for a few years. I don't care if we miss targets or if I didn't care back then. I don't know why I would care right now. Some people feel the pressure to have to put things out like that, like my friend who was covering targets with a caliper to make the AR appear to shoot better than it actually did. I think a lot of that stuff, unfortunately, it hurts us as a community because it hurts our understanding of firearms, and it brings people to say things like AKs don't matter at past 200, which is wrong. But it also, if someone took our video of me hitting a 700-yard target with an iron-sighted AK-103 and say that AKs are way lethal all the way out to those distances, like, yes, I would still take cover, but that's patently wrong. It matters more, however, if you are military, if this is your lifeline. If you miss that shot as a sniper, then that is life or death, frankly. And Adrian left me with a good saying that he and some old snipers had, is that the second is sexier than the first. We do 2 shots to clear a target on practical accuracy on purpose because we want to demonstrate that, yes, you hit the first shot, then you sank a second shot, and those were deliberate, and the rifle could do it not only once, but twice. And not only twice, but all of these targets needed 2 shots to clear. That's a deliberate choice because we wanted to show that there is consistency to it. Now, by this design, as you start missing, you rack up on that analysis chart and you start seeing these misses. And that's how you figure out, as far as these particular rifles, hey, something's going on at this distance. And typically you see that chart. Rarely do you see it like go boom, and then all of a sudden you're good, unless there's something really wrong happening. But typically you see them like 2 hits, 2 hits, 2 hits, maybe a miss, 2 hits, 2 hits, maybe a miss or 2, and then all of a sudden they'll stack high. And that's a good thing to see, because then we figured out that's the max effective range of this particular firearm. And so that's how we designed the course. And it's really interesting because, Josh, we've compiled quite a bit of data at this point, and I could go ahead and pull some of the data sets to look at, because
I think it's worth mentioning, Henry, as you're pulling this up, that all of the triad, like the Sidewinder triad, all of that is all measurable based on just knowing what your gear is, like knowing how many mils you have in your optic, for example, and from your ballistic calculator. You don't have to, like, you don't need a Kestrel, you don't need special tools or anything like that. You literally just do it off of like what you did on this. You just used a ballistic calculator and you're able to come up with what is at least very, very directionally correct. Right.
And ballistic calculators
then go out and test.
could be, yes, Slate Black Industries, thank you. Ballistic calculators could be free, and it could cost some money, or it could be free. I mean, the big thing is you're trying to correlate the energy transfer and your flight path and all that type of stuff to figure out the effectiveness of things. But yes, okay. Casey is saying that's a lot of numbers. Thank God I can't understand it. Yes, there's a lot of numbers. Oh, he's talking about the actual triad. But let's take away from the numbers, right? So this is the practical accuracy scoreboard. And if you were to search 9-hole reviews practical accuracy scoreboard on Google, now it would show you the practical accuracy scoreboard. The first thing you'll find is this. You'll notice that we have ranked all the rifles that we've shot, max ranges, cartridge, the score, going all the way down, and there's the wind condition and the temperature, right? Iron sights, Josh, some guys will say, it's just as good as optics. Now, I've gone ahead and highlighted all the iron sight rifles.
Wait, Henry, that's you. That's you. You're saying it.
I didn't say that. It seems to me that the iron sights tend to appear somewhere mid and under on the chart. I don't think iron sights are impossible to shoot well. Yes, I don't think it's impossible to shoot well. But is it more difficult to use to judge wind and bullet drop? I think so, yes. So that would be a mechanical limitation that the iron sights would have presented. Again, not saying that it's a bad thing. In fact, these are fairly small targets for iron sights to be worked on. Relatively smaller targets for iron sights to be shot at these distances. And John is saying it's probably more accurate to say that iron sights require more skill. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, but that also isn't that isn't to the point that Henry's making here. That isn't the reality of everything he's saying. Yes, they could require more skill, but Henry with an optic is better than Henry with irons.
Yes. Let's look at ACOGs. ACOGs, look, all of these things are using ACOGs. So when people are saying you need more magnification to hit at 500 and like out to 400 to 500 yards, I also think that's not the case. Now, granted, these are service rifles. If you go to DMR, all of these are actual mid range or top range optics, with the exception of the Mosin PU sniper. The Mosin PU sniper is hilarious. Like in this chart, it just doesn't fit anything. But magnification, I also don't think it's nice, but you don't necessarily need like a lot of magnification to hit at these distances. I agree at longer distances it's nice. I agree that PID it's nice. I don't think magnification is absolutely required, but optics do make it easier to hit. Also, another thing, look at the cartridges. It seems to me that 5.56 NATO has dominated the top range of these. Now, I think, though, if we push these service rifles, if we took these guys and put them on the DMR course, we would actually quickly see that the 5.56 would take the lower rung of the DMR course, because then you're past that 500 meter envelope and you're starting to see a decreased effective range of 5.56. And that's with the triad, that's a velocity it's starting to lack. And that's going to cause a lot more difficulty for the 5.56 to perform. And so I also think when people were saying, oh, 5.56 are pretty useless at 500, I politely disagree with that. The other thing is, and Josh will get angry at this. Look at all these GGG ball. Josh, the best ball. This is also ball ammo surplus.
Yep.
As a razor core. But as I'm looking at the chart, I mean, it's interesting when you start drawing or when you start seeing trends, because if you look at it, where are the AKs? The AKs are all down here, like 7.6239s. It's like very low on these. 300 blackout. The Martini Henry's on the way at the bottom. That's a compassionate pass. But also, so there's some 5.56 down here too. Let's see, like AK-9er, like that's a mechanical thing, I think. You know, it's the AK just is not as precise as some of the other rifles. AKs. I'm not saying that they're bad, but you may need a few more rounds to clear a course like this. These are all clears. These rifles all cleared the course. So I did think that it was an interesting thing to hit up the practical accuracy scoreboard and look at, you know, a larger data set and what we could use this to sort of distill into our conversation. Do you have any other?
I think that this is a pretty apt comment.
Yes, true.
And it's definitely true that there's quite a bit of stuff that we shot a long time ago that if we shot it today, we would do better with it. And we've seen that repeated when we have brought stuff back out to give it reshoots. I think that this is true. Directionally, there's still a decent idea of where you can sort of extrapolate on some of this, where what it did a while back is proportionally indicative of what we could probably do with it today. If you look at other guns that we shot a while back that also performed, you know, at different tiers and thresholds. But this is very apt. And yes, as you do stuff over time, undoubtedly this is true.
Yes. I mean, I think that's a point that we've acknowledged on the show too. And we've brought rifles that have been shot in the past to reshoot them and see if there's a difference. Some there are and some there are not. So let me drop back. Is there anything else you wanted to look at on the PA scoreboard?
No.
All right, let me drop back to the actual presentation. We are almost at the very end of it.
Yeah, and look, I mean, there's a lot of this that we just went and did a lot of like nerd dive into data on a bunch of this stuff. But you know, you alluded to this, Henry, at the beginning when you talked about what we did in on range with Adrian. This was a portion of it, but then there was a lot about establishing fundamentals and making sure that, you know, the setups were good and everything was done correctly and that the shooting marksmanship was there, because, you know, all of the ballistic, you know, the ballistics don't actually matter if you're sucking on where you're shooting, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's a huge baseline here, is that the shooter is able to deliver as a very baseline. And yes, you know, shooter and shooter differ, but I think that differential, you know, the difference between shooters really exponentially grow as the distance goes on and you start seeing ballistic issues down the road, because now we're better at identifying a cone of fire and just holding the cone of fire and just let statistics do its thing. But back then we weren't. Back then we would chase a lot more. Anyways, Josh, anything else you want to talk about? Because the next ones we're going to talk about 2025, baby.
Let's talk about 2025. Get in there.
All right, 2025. This is the year that's coming after 2024.
Sick.
We are going to talk about basically a few videos that Josh is most excited about, a few videos that I am most excited about. And these are not all of the videos. What we do, we film the back end. We have a huge backlog that we're working through. And then as the year goes on, we pull some of that the footage, we work on it more to where we could actually put things out and we wouldn't be stranded filming wise. So couple of these things are already filmed. Some are still being worked on. Josh, tell us what you're excited about.
Okay, so
Incidentally,
first and
Josh is only
foremost,
in one of these pictures, by the way.
first and foremost, people have asked us about shooting some 6mm stuff, and we finally gotten an opportunity to do that with like one of the most redonkulous Gucci versions of what that could be, which is your GFR outfitted with a tangent theta. So an absolute monster of a rifle. And this thing, holy crap. That's all I'm gonna say. Very excited. We have shot this one, and very excited to do some additional work with it, get the video all done and ready. I hope we can get this one out sooner rather than later, because this thing was a monster.
Yes. So that what he's talking about is a Geisley GFR. It's a 6-arc specific rifle. 6-arc is it's not a new cartridge per se. It's one of the Hornady advanced rifle cartridges, ARC. It is basically 6mm arc is a projectile that fits into the small frame AR-15, but fires a 6mm projectile. Now, I mean, what's the difference between that and 6.5 Grendel? Well, ladies and gentlemen, velocity is amazing, BC is amazing. The downside to 6-arc has always been that it's hard on the receivers, the bolts, and basically it's a higher pressure that a normal AR-15 has trouble with. That's what I've read so far. And on top of that, the magazines are not extremely reliable if you use non-6-arc magazines, or I think some guys, do they use 6.5 Grendel magazines?
I think there's Grendel mags, that like the ones with the huge curves. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was for a long time, there was kind of an iffy thing. A lot of people were just running them in bolt actions because of the reliability issue. But the GFR is one of those I don't know how it exists, because you can see, just looking at this, you see those rivets on top of the receiver right there, right here. That's a reinforcing plate on the receiver, so it doesn't freaking blow up and rip itself to shreds.
Yeah.
And so it's not just an AR. It looks like just an AR from outside, but it is definitely stacked, they may say.
So that one's legit. I'm excited to start showcasing that, because we're not particularly experienced shooting that caliber, or like
you didn't need experience for that caliber.
That, I would just say it was there was a cheat codes unlocked,
especially with a 5K tangent theta 3 to 15 marksman like that.
Yes, your exploratory work into Gucci glass is to the much to my
much to your delight. It is festering.
Delight, yeah.
Anyways, so what else do we have here?
The next thing is my personal AI, which you have.
That's Kevin's AX.
Yes, you have been egging me on to get an AI over the last few years. Kevin at Full Evan Auto and Henry convinced me collectively to get an AI. What is it? AXSR. So they convinced me to do this. It is an extremely expensive gun, but it shoots really, really well. So we haven't done a whole lot with it yet, but it will be a lot of fun to bring that on the show and really get some time behind it. And then
what you see right there, I know it's Josh is running my AW up there. I just want to tell people that's the SA. So that's a short action version of what Josh has. Josh has the big boy version of that, which if you looked at the Paris Olympics, the GIGN were actually running the AI, the AXSR on the rooftops in Paris. So it is GIGN Gucci, ladies and gentlemen. Anyways,
the last thing, and this is one that I'm probably all in the most invested in. Financially, yes, but also by like my level of interest. And that is shooting large frame gas guns and potentially dispelling myths associated with some of these large frame gas guns across the spectrum. I now have secured 4, 5, 6 different like big popular ones over the last year.
Rattle them off, Josh. Rattle them off.
Well, we have the Noveski, we have a LaRue, we have your PSA, we have
The best.
we have like some other like mid-tier ones. Munitions Works sent us in one to test as well. What was some more? We have the TX10 that I've had for a long time, and we're going to try to get some more.
So
the purpose of this is to pull together, to the best of our ability, some sort of catalog that allows us to assess the overall on these particular guns, and then just on ones that we have access to that aren't in possession. You have the K1, which is the Centurion build that Kevin has. He also has a Craddock barreled like MRGG setup as well. So there are going to be a lot of tests that we run on this. This is going to be a long-term thing. This is like 12 months or so. We have a lot of work to do on this, but it's going to be hopefully a lot of fun and very exciting. And I'll just do one quick shout out of like semi-inspiration here was the guys at 100 Concepts. They posted an episode where they did like 10 different ARs. Or AR-10s rather, like large frame guns, and what they were getting. And one thing that I really appreciated about that was some of the groupings that they were posting, and the average accuracy was more in alignment with the reality that Henry and I were seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of inspired us to want to do some more work down this avenue.
So first of all, Josh being interested in another series of AR stuff, to my shock. But it is an interesting thing because I've seen a lot of people kind of in line to what we're talking about here, but not with ballistic capabilities. The actual physical reliability and capability and accuracy expectation of the AR-10s. Like when Lucas over at T-Rex came out with his AR-10 like long form reviews, a lot of people got upset because they're saying, "Oh no, mine never jams, mine never has this, mine never does that." Okay, well, we've gathered a few, and we have a lot of data points that we've been taking down on that. To that extent, we just released a PSA M110 clone video. What, like 2 weeks ago, Josh? What was it?
Thanksgiving.
I crap on that a lot. I genuinely think that the PSA is a really freaking good trainer rifle. I know a lot of people don't like hearing that. I cannot deny that that thing does what you intend for it to do at a price point that is almost unbeatable. So it's stuff like this, observations like this, that I do think it is really interesting that Josh especially is taking the initiative to work the AR series even more. So anything else? I mean,
No, go ahead and tell people about all the non-ARs that you're going to be shooting.
Oh man, look at this flavorable palette of deliciousness right here. And obviously, one of them is the rear side of me that people so very much talk about on Reddit. So I realized, I don't know why I should have put another wood rifle here, but I'm running out of space on the actual slide. The M41B. Now, I've long said that I really like the Lee Enfield No. 4 Mark 1 T Sniper. But Ian has a lot of times said the M41B, which is the Swedish Mauser in 6.5 by 55, has been considered as one of the best World War II sniper rifles. Ironically, it never participated in World War II. But if you look at it, and think about what it is, it certainly has a lot of elements that would be advantageous to the current precision rifle shooter, which is a great smooth action 6.5 that performs or exceeds the 6.5 by 50 6.5 Creedmoor's ballistics. Pretty similar, to be honest. Excellent optics. The Ajax scope or Ajax scope, if you prefer that, is some of the best glass of its era, exceedingly clear even if you look at it nowadays. So all of those elements are elements that we look for modern precision rifles. And yet this is a World War II era conglomeration of this type of stuff. So I know a lot of people on Reputation are really interested in this to begin with. I have shot this quite a bit. I really like the rifle. I'm hoping to get this out to get content on it, more content on it. It's already made an appearance on the 1MOA all day long video. But on top of that, as you've seen on the thumbnail, the Pkwy MP5 sniper certainly is going to make an appearance. And we are going to see if the mighty MP5 SD is able to clear 5 Hondo. This is already filmed, so Josh and I know. But you guys out there, you tell us, what do you think is going to happen? Especially with the knowledge that you've gained on the Max Effective Triad that Adrian's put together. You can do the math, actually. It's shooting 124. They were plus P, but the MP5 SD converted to subsonic. So you can just drop like, 950 or 1,000 on the feet per second, and you can do the math yourself. Enjoy. The HD18 or the Hungarian Dragunov SVD. The very apparently not Russian Dragunov has been shot on the course and is one of, look, Josh, I love the Dragunov. I can't believe I have one. I never thought I would have one. I love the rifle and I just want to make propaganda on it. And I don't care if people get sick of Dragunov content, even though I only have one. I am looking forward to the Dragunov going on range. And finally, we have the HK53, and this is a genuine HK. 8.9 inches of barrel, pushing 5.56 downrange. And turns out we shot it with 223 spec ammunition. So the best, once again. So as far as the two HKs here, the MP5 SD, we specifically look at the military employment of the MP5 SD as a sniper, and we look at the UK military employment of the HK53. The MP5 SD, we talked to Teufelhund Tactical and a little bit with Jonathan Ferguson over in Royal Armories. But the HK53, we do have a segment with Jonathan Ferguson in it, who did a significant amount of research on the UK employment of the HK53. So yes, all of those things, nerd, done.
So from Nick, thanks for the 5. I'd really like to see more variations of the slate black rail panels, offering different textures or colors. Pretty pleased with sugar on top. Would you want more aggressive textures or less aggressive textures, or you literally just want different designs? And then we have a lot of the colors, right? We basically have all the key colors covered at this point between black, FD, ODG, and sort of like wolf gray. Mm-hmm. What colors are you after, man?
Arctic.
We actually had some of the guys in the Discord did a right dye experiment and got plum, which I know we've seen in the past as well.
Let's see. Anything else you want to tell everyone about the future upcomings?
Let's open this up for questions.
All right, we are a bit over. We said it's going to be an hour and a half. It's like 2 hours at this point. Ladies and gentlemen out there, do you guys have any questions? Tell us now. Hammer.
Oh, this is one that is on the list. I just talked a bunch about how I'm trying to get a bunch of these big boy gas guns in. This is one of the ones that I'd love to get. Haven't got it yet, but would love to. Look, frankly, all of these really high grade premium gas guns appear like they're ridiculously expensive. We don't have time on this one yet, but hopefully this time next year we'll be able to give you guys a better understanding of where we are in terms of price per like value set on these large frame guns. Look, the short answer is unless you're shooting gas gun stuff here in the States, like it's very hard to justify like these rifles that are like 4 or 5K when there are really nice bolt guns that are like 1,500, right? So purely from a value perspective, it's hard. Coming from the person who now has multiple of them.
Well, I would say, talking about the value, and this is one of the topics that we wanted to talk about: gas gun versus bolt. What is the value prop for the extra money spent there versus for the same money? Because AI is like an AT is at AI AT is at what, 4K?
Mhm.
That's the price of an MR762, I believe.
Mhm.
I mean, granted, that's an MR762. It's not a PSA 110, which is why the PSA 110 is really cool, is because it's at the mid-range bolt gun type of price point. But if you're talking about a gasser that's not running even like heavy barrel or like super mash barrel or anything like that, being the same price as a premium bolt action, a huge question right there.
Yeah. Thanks for the 5 EMH. In fact, we actually had filmed the bolt versus gas gun video, and while the patrons got to see it, we ultimately decided we were going to hold off on releasing it in lieu of doing all of this other testing on the large frame gas guns. So Nick says more aggressive textures. You can stipple them up in the short term, man, but I'm open to exploring some more aggressive texture.
Here's one, Josh. Would you guys consider putting a 1022 on the 500 course? Josh knows that I have already purchased a company 1022 over Black Friday. So that's on the works. I'd like to get an integrally suppressed barrel for it. I don't know. I need to talk to Josh on whether that should be a thing, because I think it's interesting because the 1022 actually integrally suppressed 1022s. There is a real world use, most notably by the Israelis. They use it as you'll get a kick out of this, Josh. An integrally suppressed 1022 is used as a non-lethal or less lethal system in Israel for anti-riots.
No comments.
So I think that would be an interesting one. Angstadt has a cool integral barrel. I don't know if you've seen it, Josh. They basically have a barrel that's ported inside, so there's no baffles. It's just a barrel with a sleeve on the outside, and there's a bunch of ports going down. Compared to other rimfire stuff, way easier to clean. So I don't know. That's one. Taxol has one, I think. I don't know yet. I mean, we just have the literal thing right now. It's not fully kitted. So yes, but not yet.
From Protect and Preserve, how much more accurate is 223 Wild chambering versus 5.56? We have an AR files filmed regarding chamberings. Frankly, I have never been able to identify and measure this because there's too many variables barrel to barrel to, in my opinion, from what I've done, to be able to be like, oh yeah, barrel to barrel, everything else is perfectly identical and just the chambering is being tested. For perspective, my TX15, which is I think the most accurate one that we've had on the show thus far in terms of 5.56 ARs that we've printed groups with, although it's getting tired at this current time. That barrel is getting tired. That is a 5.56 chamber. That LSA does some special sauce too, but it's a 5.56 chamber. It's not a 223 Wild. So
this is something that I thought was interesting with the TX10 and TX15, specifically your TX15. Side note to this, talking to Andrew over at Lone Star Armory. So Andrew learned gunsmithing from one of my contacts. You remember my M21? The
Mhm.
gunsmith who did the M21, Ken Corcoran, the warrant officer who was with the AMU. He was my friend Andy's dad. Andy was an officer that I served with. Ken is one of the last M14/M21 gunsmiths who is even around, like officially did that for the military. One of the really good ones, and people in Alaska would know him. Andrew over at Lone Star LSA had learned a lot of gunsmithing from Ken,
Very cool.
and the chambering that he uses at LSA is a chambering that the AMU specifically uses that Ken had designed for the AMU. And he's one of the rare he's one of the rare manufacturers who can offer that Ken Corcoran chambering. And
Very cool.
it is something that specifically the AMU developed that does well with competition and precision shooting.
Just as a final on the 223 Wild versus 556 thing, we'll put a bow on it with this. So we talked about how the 556 one that we have from LSA was shooting insane. Recently, we got in one of the Ridgeline lightweight precision rifles, which is another 556 AR that's running a 223 Wild proof barrel. And that gun, I passed the 10 MOA or the 1 MOA all day challenge with 10 shots, all landing inside of an inch. So again, there's another example of like the flip side of that, going back the other direction. I think it just comes down to, if you buy a really high quality barrel and you have a high quality setup, build, ammunition, like the guns are going to shoot really tight.
So to that note, though, my HK93 SG1, the SG1 series of the HK91s, HK93s, HK33s, and G3s, the SG1s are basically the sniper versions of those things, but they didn't really do any changes to the internals like the PSG ones did. My HK93 SG1 shoots ball ammunition exceedingly tight. But that chamber is a military chamber. It's a fluted military chamber with HK steel. So the barrel, the bore material is extremely nice. In fact, we've got the MR556 episode coming out. The MR556 A4 episode's coming out. And are we going to talk about bore material, chrome line, non-chrome line type of things on that episode? So it's a long one, but it's a lot of juiciness coming down.
In from Nick again. Nick, thanks for the 5 again. And what would be a good bolt gun for 15-2 for someone looking to get into PRS shooting? I don't know much about the bolt action market. And to be honest, Henry and I don't really know the intricate details of PRS. And I think I can speak sort of like more directly about this. Like, I know very intricate details of USPSA from 2017, 18, 19 when I was shooting. I know exactly what the rules are, so I could optimally suggest a very specific gun, setup, configuration, whatever else to maximize within the rule sets. Even today, with some of the new divisions that have been set up, I don't know as I can still extrapolate like pretty good, but I don't, because I haven't competed in the last 5 or 6 years. I don't have as refined of an answer today for USPSA as I did back then. With that said, Henry, 15-2, what are the bolt guns that are in that space that come to mind to you?
Okay, my recommendation on this, we have an episode on training rifles. It got demonetized. I don't know why YouTube likes to demonetize our bolt action rifle videos. Like every one of them. SSG 69, Car 98K Sniper, Car 98K Sniper PA, all of them. If it's a bolt action, they'll try to deactivate it. I mean, but hey, we have Israeli assassin pistol is okay, evidently. But on the topic of that, with the training rifle aspect, I would approach it like a training rifle. Get a good training rifle to where you could use it in long term, and then you can shoot some PRS with it, because you don't know what you want at this point if you're getting into it. You need to get into it and understand what you need to develop, and then get what you want. So 15 to 2 is a very generous amount. I don't know if that is with optics. With optics, that is less generous, but
Right.
still very doable. Um, Immediately, things that come to my mind, and this may be old information, but still useful information. The RPRs are
Definitely. Ruger RPR has to be on the list.
highly customizable. You can get barrels for it. You can wrench on it yourself. You can get all that stuff done yourself.
Scalable, can scale
Yes.
particularly well, right?
So the RPR, I think, is a good choice because of the modularity and the aftermarket support. Remington 700 may laugh at it, but it still has a lot of parts that you could put onto it.
Go for the Bagara end of the spectrum,
I was
right?
going to say Bergara, but once you get to Bergara, you're eating up closer to that 15 mark, and your optic money is dwindling.
Yeah.
The reason I would say 700 or Bergara maybe options is because you could also scale those.
Mhm.
A
lot
lot
of
of parts work
aftermarket.
with it, yeah. And the other one is going to be the Tika Tak A1.
Yeah. That one's a
Uh,
little bit north of 2, but I agree that would be another one.
It used to be in this range. And of all of these options, I would also point out that there is a massive used market that you could take advantage of.
Good point.
So when you dip into the used market, you let some other poor bastard take the brunt of buying a new rifle and then having to sell it used and lose the money. Once you buy a used rifle, it's a used rifle. You could sell it for the same used price. Granted, you don't train wreck the entire thing, or you can continue to use it as a training rifle and pass it along to someone else down the road. So
Two additional pieces from me real quick on this one. The Havoc hit from Seekins is about 2. I personal experience with one through a buddy who sent me groupings earlier today, shooting quite tight groups with it. Loves it, big fan. And the other one, don't have any experience with, but that comes to mind. Really quick, Henry, before I get to this last one, the Aero Solus is one that comes to mind as a potential option. Haven't shot them, haven't messed with them, don't know how good they are or aren't, but that's in the price bucket. Where's that DD come in at?
DD is right at 25.
Okay, so a little bit out of this range.
You can go under to get the non-chassis DDs at this range, but then again, you're cutting out a lot of your optic money. I will say on the Aero Solus, Adrian uses the Aero Solus for some of his demo stuff. So Sidewinder concept, Adrian, you could maybe hit him up, ask him what he thinks about it. I mean, he's got some pretty cool. He recently did a pretty cool retro mod build out of a Solus. So yeah,
he actually just texted me and says he suggests about the same list. Yeah, he says Savage also has a comp gun.
Yeah. The Savage one is probably the lower cost of all of them, and I would say it's fine as an entry rifle, but there's chassis and stuff you can get for it, but a lot of people, when they go the Savage route, they quickly grow out of it and they end up losing more money on the used side. But if you buy it used, again, this is how you weather some of the financial brunt.
Tejas Customs. Are we accepting dealers for SBI? Yeah, always, man. Go ahead and hit up the email.
For the Familia and Tejas? Yes.
Of course. GA10, so Gap. Yes. I very much would like to get one of these. Again, very expensive. But yes, I want to try to get one of these for the show as well. Hopefully somebody has one they can loan us, because I will not financially recover from just buying all of the large frame cast guns across the market. I'll get absolutely crushed.
This one. The SPR A5, the FNSP. Do you know the FNSPR?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's our era when we were getting into guns. That was one of the Gucci precision rifles, and the A5 specifically is the FBI rifle that FN made. I mean, it's passe. It's mid 2000s GWAT era law enforcement rifle, but super cool, super prominent. Uses M240 blanks to make the barrel when people were all poo-pooing cold hammer forged barrels back then. FN decided to do that, and the rifles shoot exceedingly well. Uses a control feed mechanism, much like a Mauser. Well, it is a Mauser control feed mechanism. Even has the Mauser type of safety that actually resembles more of the AI safety if you look at it. Very cool. So congrats on finding your Grail rifle. Arcan optics. I have no experience on them.
Yeah, haven't shot them. What I would say about there's this massive proliferation over the last like 3 to 5 years of these like these mid-tier optic manufacturers who have some budget end stuff and some mid-tier stuff. My suspicion, don't know specifics about Arcan, not a direct comment about Arcan, but my suspicion is that a lot of this stuff is like white labeled stuff that's, you know, relatively coming from the same few sources. That's what we know to be true for larger manufacturing as well in many of these cases. And again, that's just a general commentary, not specific here, not specific at all. I don't have experience. One of the things that I've seen is that a lot of these mid-tier optics are very, very functional, like very functional. However, at some point in time, when you start looking down like nicer stuff, and like the let's call it the premium tier optics, they just are really nice, and it's hard to want to go back and shoot some of the other stuff if you don't have to. I mean, Henry, fair assessment on that. It's not like we can't or we don't or whatever, but
Yeah,
you know, it's not like you're going out and getting, you know, some of like the budget tier stuff or the low mid tier stuff to slap on a rifle when you're, you know, when it's an AI, right?
let's say let me put it this way: the primary arms, they're very, very defined on their tier system. It's the SLX,
Yeah.
the GLX, so the silver, the gold, and then the platinum, the PLX. So the PLX stuff is, like you were saying, white labeled from Light Optics work out in Japan. Now, then you have the GLX. And GLX is a very usable optic. However, on days that it is foggy, rainy, dusk, or dawn, in those situations, you certainly see a difference between like Schmidt, your night forces, and that.
Yeah.
The question, again, it comes back to this, like, be honest with yourself. What are you going to use it for? If it's for a training rifle, then boohoo. Like, okay, it's eat your breakfast burrito when the sun is coming out. I mean, don't waste your ammo when you can't see it. And then get into shooting and figure out what you actually want in the long term. But instead of, I mean, I think something that some people get bullied into is like they think they need to buy the Night Force, they need to buy the Schmidt, they need to buy the Kalas, and then they buy it and they got the wrong reticle or they got the wrong turrets that they would regret down the road. Figure those things out with a mid-range optic. And even if you only shoot like 5 times a year, then definitely get the mid-range optic. Don't get the expensive stuff, because I'd be the first one to say I'd rather take my family on a vacation with that money than tie it into an optic that's going to be obsolete in a couple of years. So be honest with yourself. What are you trying to do with it? What do you need it for? Yeah.
I mean, I've been watching some of MMM's stuff, and yeah, I mean, he's shooting the Arcans really well. Again, I think that a lot of these, you know, again, that the mid-tier stuff can perform really well. And to Henry's point, you know. I suppose we could do this, but we've really standardized all of the stuff to have Henry do the majority of the shooting, so it's more consistent in terms of.
Josh is really good at spotting, and Josh and I, we could flip our roles. So it's kind of one of those things. Like, we could flip our roles and do the other person's job. I could also shoot short range at an average pace. Now I've learned quite a bit from Josh on the shorter range stuff. So I'm like average or better, but I'm not at Josh's level. So same thing with spotting. Josh is better at spotting than I am now. So it's one of those things. Like, can Josh shoot? Yeah, Josh absolutely can shoot. Like, I've seen him clear the course on his own time multiple times with a lot of stuff. But I think right now,
I
the
can't shoot
project.
iron sight stuff like you can. That wouldn't be a fair assessment of
What
how to
I'm
do
trying to
that.
say is, though, the project right now is to look at these rifles and get enough consistency to where we could draw conclusions in the long run, like we did today.
Exactly, precisely. Yep.
I saw a comment here. VZ54 is going to happen, has been filmed. Man, it's just a queue. We need to get through the queue. The VZ54, I don't know if you remember, it was the Czech 7.62 sniper, the
Mhm.
one that the Mosin Nagant PU's wife tells him he's just a friend. Yeah, that's that one. Let's see. All right, we are coming short, but look at this. The SSG 3000. That has also been filmed, and oh my! Thanks to Commando Store for making the actual Sasha top. We actually have the full Sasha outfit. But anyways, the SSG 3000 is... I have a lot to say about that. It's one of those sad stories that particular company destroyed, in my opinion. I think 6.5 versus 308 is a really good topic. I think we've delved into it even more, and right now I think that the more interesting thing in the last couple months that we've been doing is more 16-inch barrel 6.5 and 16-inch barrel 308 and seeing the characteristics of the two. So
here's a really good thing you can do using the information that you learned here this evening. Do the Sidewinder Triad on a 6.5 gun versus the 308 gun. So Henry gave you his 20-inch 308 data. Go back and run that with 6.5s and see what the difference is.
Let's see. Again, this one actually has not been filmed. We need to push it out, but yes, I need more trigger time behind it before I'm comfortable to drop it on range. But yes, I'm looking forward to shooting the Sako TRG 22. Hopefully we can get an A1 as well, but yeah.
Cool.
So
Stuff.
I'll leave it at this. Yes, the Sasha top is a lovely, lovely piece. Yes, that's going to be a fun one because we'll delve into actually like the SSG 3000 is like a formidable rifle. Yes. But the character Sasha and the SSG 3000 is a really good combination because both of those are kind of the dark side of sports shooters gone snipers.
All right. Gang, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us here this evening. We had a fantastic 2024. We hope you guys did as well. Looking forward to what's coming in 2025. And just remember again, a few key takeaways. When you're watching the 9-hole show, remember that the repeatability of what we're doing on a course with different guns isn't always going to be the same. So regardless if we put up a run that looks really good, don't go around saying that, oh, yes, 9-hole did this, so always it's possible. Or 9-hole couldn't do this, and so it is impossible. Just remember. A little bit of nuance, right?
Don't listen to him. What we do is gospel. Just take that as is and go forth and spread the gospel. But anyways, I want to reiterate, that's not just a mess with you, but I do want to reiterate, though, Adrian's point. The second impact is sexier than the first shot. So, yes, impact, but neutralized. That is what you want. Second round. Anyways, Josh, anything else?
See you guys on the range.
716 is Steel Knight 6, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Redcon 1, green to green. How copy, over?
Steel Knight 6, this is 716, roger, over. 16, Steel Knight 1 pack, green, over. This is 716, roger, over.
716 is Steel Knight 6, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Redcon 1, green to green. How copy, over?
Steel Knight 6, this is 716, roger, over. 16, Steel Knight 1 pack, green, over. This is 716, roger, over.
16, Steel Knight 2, 1 Victor, 2 packs, Redcon 1, over.